I first saw her the week I moved into the basement flat. It was early, still cool enough that the windows fogged a little when I boiled water for coffee. She was standing on the back step of the main house, one hand on the doorframe, the other holding a rolled-up newspaper she didn't seem to be reading. Her hair was pulled back, but strands had slipped loose around her face. I remember thinking she looked like she'd been up for hours already. I'd been fighting with the old radiator for half an hour and finally gave up, sliding the wrench back into my backpack. When I stepped outside for air, she was there, and for a second we just looked at each other. Not a stare, more like a mutual pause. "You're the new tenant," she said finally. Her voice was low, a little rough, like she'd been talking all morning. "Yeah, Sam," I said, tucking my phone into my pocket so it wouldn't look like I'd been scrolling. She nodded, eyes flicking to the wrench still in my hand. "That thing's temperamental. I should have warned you." I half smiled. "Guess I'll learn its moods." That made her almost smile, too. A tiny movement at the corner of her mouth, then gone. She shifted the newspaper under her arm, like she wasn't sure whether to leave. I noticed then how quiet it was in the small courtyard between our doors. No traffic, just a pigeon hopping along the wall and the faint ticking of the cooling radiator through the open window. She cleared her throat. "If it gives you too much trouble, knock on my door. I know where the shutoff is." "Thanks," I said. My fingers tightened on the wrench. I wanted to say something else. Ask her name properly, comment on the morning, but the words stacked up and didn't move. Instead, she filled the silence herself. "Coffee?" she asked, gesturing vaguely toward her kitchen. "I'm making some anyway." It was such an ordinary offer that it startled me. "Sure," I said before I could overthink it. Inside, her kitchen smelled like toast and something faintly citrus. She poured coffee into 2 chipped mugs, set one in front of me. The mug was warm, but my hands still fidgeted, folding and refolding the paper napkin she slid across the counter. "You don't have to drink it if it's too strong," she said. "No, it's good," I murmured, though I hadn't tasted it yet. We sat at the edge of her table, not quite facing each other. She asked about my work. I answered in pieces. She listened without nodding much, but her eyes kept flicking to my hands on the napkin, then back to my face. I tried a joke about the radiator. Maybe it just needs someone to talk to, and she gave a small, dry laugh. Not a big laugh, but enough to leave a mark. When I finally stood to go, she walked me to the door, but didn't open it. We stood there a second too long. Her fingers brushed the frame as if she'd forgotten what she was about to do. "Let me know about the heat," she said softly. "I will," I said. My phone buzzed in my pocket just then, a message from an unknown number. "You left your wrench upstairs." I looked up. She was watching me. And that was how it started, with a radiator that wouldn't behave, a coffee I hadn't expected, and a text I wasn't sure she meant to send. The next week blurred into work and half-finished dinners. Most evenings I stayed in, scrolling through my phone, writing messages I never sent. "Hey, thanks for the coffee." Delete. "Radiator's working again." Delete. By Friday, the wrench still sat on the counter like a forgotten clue. I'd just come back from a late shift when I saw her porch light still on. Through the window, I caught a glimpse of her wiping down the counter, moving slower than she had that first morning. It felt odd, seeing her in that unguarded rhythm, the kind people have when no one's supposed to be watching. A few minutes later, there was a knock on my door. She stood there holding a ceramic bowl. "Soup," she said. I made too much. I hesitated, then opened the door wider. "Thanks." She stepped inside, but only a little, as if respecting an invisible border. I set the bowl on the tiny table near the window. "You didn't have to." "It's just soup," she said with a shrug, but her eyes flicked toward the wrench still on the counter. "You didn't come up about the radiator." "It fixed itself," I said, or I stopped caring. That earned me the smallest smile again. She leaned against the doorframe. "You're young enough to let things slide. That goes away after a while." I wanted to ask her age, but didn't. Instead, I heard myself say, "I didn't expect to like it here this quickly." She tilted her head, curious. "Why?" "Because it's quiet," I said. "And because you're—" I stopped, realizing how it sounded. Helpful. Something passed over her face. Not anger exactly. More like she'd been caught off guard. She came fully into the flat then, peering at the radiator like it mattered. When I was your age, she said quietly, I lived in a place smaller than this. My son was too. We had one heater that rattled all winter. I used to put him in my coat at night. She didn't look at me as she said it. Her fingers rested on the edge of the windowsill, tracing a line through the dust. You have a son? I asked, my voice lower. Grown now, she said. College. Far away. I didn't know what to say. She turned back toward the door, but didn't leave. The air between us shifted, heavier but not unfriendly. Must have been hard, I said finally. She gave a small shrug. You do what you do? Then it's done. The soup steamed on the table, untouched. I thought about how she'd called me young a moment ago, how different our lives had been at the same age. For a second, I imagined reaching across, taking her hand, not in some movie way, just to see if it would steady the space between us. I stayed still. Sorry, she said suddenly. I didn't mean to unload. You didn't, I said. It's nice to know someone's been through things and still. I trailed off, unsure what word fit. Survived? Remained? She met my eyes then, steady. Still shows up, she said softly. We stood there in the quiet, the soup cooling, the ticking radiator sounding almost like a clock. My phone buzzed on the counter with some notification I ignored. I should go, she murmured. Okay, I said, though I didn't move. She reached for the bowl, but I caught it first. Leave it, I said. I'll wash it. Our fingers brushed around the ceramic edge. Just a second, skin against skin, enough to feel how warm her hand still was from holding the bowl. We both pulled back at the same time, but something had already shifted. The air, my pulse, the way she avoided my eyes now. I don't know why that moment stayed with me. I would think later, lying awake. Maybe because it felt like someone finally saw me. She cleared her throat. Good night, Sam. Good night, I said. She slipped out the door, and for a long time I stared at the bowl she'd left behind, as if it meant more than soup. The next few evenings she didn't appear. No light in her kitchen window. No knock. I told myself it was normal. People have lives, but still caught myself checking when I came home, like waiting for a train I wasn't sure was running. Saturday morning, the washing machine broke. Water pooled under the door. I went upstairs to ask about a shutoff. She opened the door, already holding a towel, like she'd heard the flood. You okay? She asked. Mostly, I said. Basement's taking on water. She followed me down, barefoot, hair pulled into a knot that was coming undone. We knelt on the tile, sopping up the mess with old rags. Our elbows bumped once, then again, neither of us moving away. Sorry about this, she muttered. It's not your fault. Her voice lowered. Sometimes feels like everything's my fault. She glanced at me, quick and then gone. I wanted to ask what she meant. Instead, I wrung out the rag until water dripped through my fingers. She sat back on her heels, hands limp in her lap. I don't even know what you do all day, she said suddenly. You're gone, and then you're here, and... She cut herself off, shook her head. Never mind. I work at a print shop, I said. Mostly nights. Oh, she said, as if she'd guessed something else. Her hands rubbed her knees like she was cold. Then a voice floated down from upstairs, a man's voice. Deep, casual. You need more towels? She stiffened. It's just my brother, she said quickly, dropping off some things. I nodded but felt the air shift. She stood, brushed at her jeans. He shouldn't see you down here like this. He worries. I opened my mouth to ask why, but she was already heading up the stairs. Halfway up, she turned back. Stay until the water's gone. I'll bring another rag. Her tone was brisk now, landlord-like. By the time she returned, her brother was gone. She handed me a towel without meeting my eyes. We worked in silence. The radiator ticked again. Somewhere a phone buzzed, and she ignored it. When the floor was mostly dry, she leaned against the counter, breathing hard. You should go out more, she said. You're too young to stay in this basement. I like the quiet, I said. She looked at me then, really looked. Her hand lifted as if to brush a damp streak of hair from my forehead, but stopped midair. Fingers hovered, retreated. She swallowed. I shouldn't, she murmured. Shouldn't what? I asked, softer than I meant. Her eyes flicked to my mouth, then away. For a second, the whole room felt smaller, like we'd stepped into some narrower space where everything mattered more. I shifted closer without thinking. She stepped back. Nothing, she said too quickly. Then, after a beat, nothing at all. I watched her go upstairs, her damp footprints fading on the tile, and realized how close we'd been to something neither of us could name. It rained 3 days straight, the kind of steady drizzle that makes time feel slow and heavy. By the fourth evening, the basement smelled faintly of damp concrete. I was sitting on the steps with a mug of tea when she came out, umbrella closed, hair damp around her face. "Walk?" she asked, almost like a dare. I followed her out through the side gate. The street was washed clean, the air metallic with rain. We walked without touching, side by side under the dim street lamps, our reflections sliding over puddles. She spoke first. "My brother said you seem attached." I glanced at her. "He only saw me mopping up water." She gave a quick laugh that didn't reach her eyes. "He thinks I'm lonely. He worries I'll mistake kindness for other things." We walked a few more steps. Water dripped from a tree branch, landing on my sleeve. I shook it off. "Is he wrong?" I asked quietly. She stopped then, looked out over the park across the street. "I don't know anymore." We sat on a damp bench under the faint shelter of a cedar. She wrapped her arms around herself, not from cold exactly, more like holding something in. I sipped my tea, tasting nothing. "I told you I had a son," she said finally. "What I didn't say is, his father left before he was born. I spent years teaching myself not to expect people to stay." She gave a small shrug, as if it were a weather report. "Now he's grown, and here I am, still renting out the basement." Her voice cracked just once on the word grown. I wanted to tell her she wasn't just a landlord, that I'd been thinking about her every night, about her hand almost touching my hair in the laundry room. But the words clumped in my throat. "You're too young for this," she said suddenly, still looking away. "Too young to get tangled in someone like me." I set the mug down on the bench, fingers tight. "I don't feel young when I'm with you." That made her look at me, quick and sharp. Then softer. "Don't," she whispered. "Please." We sat there listening to the rain on the cedar. My knee bounced. Her hand was on the bench between us, palm up, empty. Without thinking, I let my fingers drift until they almost brushed hers. She didn't move away. Her thumb shifted once, a tiny tremor, but she kept her gaze forward. "Sometimes," she said, "I imagine what would happen if I didn't stop myself. If I just let things happen." The air felt thin. "What do you imagine?" I asked. She breathed in, slow. "That someone would finally see me, and then hate me for it later." I swallowed. "I could never." "Don't say it," she cut in. "You don't know yet." Silence again. The street lamp flickered once. I could hear her breathing, steady but shallow. My hand stayed just shy of hers, a space as thin as a breath. Every part of me wanted to close it. She turned to me then, eyes searching. "Why are you really here, Sam?" she asked softly. "This place." "Me." I opened my mouth, felt the confession rise, that I'd started staying home not for the quiet but for the chance to see her, that the soup bowl was still on my counter like a keepsake. But I only said, "I don't know." She tilted her head, studying me like she could hear all the words I hadn't said. "You do," she murmured. Another pause. Rain pooled at our feet. Her hand trembled once more, still inches from mine. I thought, this is the moment. This is where something changes. She whispered, "What are you going to do?" And before I could answer, the question hung there between us, heavier than the rain. The morning after our walk, her kitchen window stayed dark. No light, no movement, just a closed curtain where she usually left it half open. By the second day, the umbrella I'd seen her carry was gone from the porch hook. On the third day, a note slid under my door. "Plumbing inspection Tuesday. Please clear space near radiator." Nothing else. No thanks or sorry. Her handwriting smaller than before. I tried to convince myself she was just busy, but the silence felt deliberate, like a door clicked shut from the inside. At work I found myself staring at paper stacks, not seeing them. My manager asked if I was okay. "Fine," I said. "Just tired." Every few hours I pulled out my phone. Typed, "Everything okay?" Deleted. "Did I do something?" Deleted. The drafts sat there like a row of unsent lifeboats. One evening I heard voices in her kitchen. A man's, low and steady, not the brother's. Laughter I hadn't heard from her before. I stayed at the foot of the basement stairs until it stopped, then went back inside without knocking. Later that night, I saw a light under her door as she left for somewhere. She passed me in the courtyard, but didn't slow. "Evening," she said softly, eyes on the ground. She wore a coat I hadn't seen before, dark blue, almost formal, and makeup, just enough to look like she was heading somewhere she wanted to be seen. I almost asked who she was meeting. Instead, I said, "Radiator's fine." She nodded, disappeared into the rain. 2 days later, she came back to collect the rent in person, something she usually let the bank handle. She looked tired, older somehow. The blue coat was folded over her arm. She didn't step inside. "Everything okay?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "Fine," she said. "Just trying to stay ahead of things." "You don't have to explain," I said, but I wanted her to. She hesitated. "Then, my son dropped out of college. He's staying with his father for now. I went to see them." Her mouth pressed flat after the words. "It's complicated." "I didn't know," I murmured. "I didn't say," she replied, eyes on the floor. Then, more quietly, "I'm sorry if I've been distant." "It's your life," I said. "You don't owe me." But she cut me off. "Maybe I do." A flick of something in her eyes, then gone. "Anyway, rent's good. Radiator too. Take care, Sam." Before I could answer, she turned, went up the steps, and closed the door. This time I heard the bolt slide. That night, I didn't feel heartbroken. I felt paused, like life forgot to finish the sentence. I sat at my kitchen table, the soup bowl still on the counter, my phone in my hand. Typed, "I don't care about the rent. I just want to see you." Deleted. Typed, "Can we talk?" Deleted. Outside, her kitchen window stayed dark. I imagined her in some other room, breathing, existing, unreachable. The space between us felt both paper-thin and miles wide. I didn't knock. I didn't send the message. I stayed in the basement until the tea went cold, waiting for a sound that didn't come. It was nearly midnight when I finally went upstairs. I'd been sitting at my kitchen table again, staring at the drafts on my phone, when I saw a thin line of light under her door. It was the first light in days. Before I could talk myself out of it, I climbed the stairs and knocked once, softly. She opened the door almost at once, like she'd been standing there. Her hair was loose, face bare, sweater sleeves pushed up. No coat, no makeup. Just her. "Sam." She said my name like a question. The words clung to my throat. "I didn't want to bother you." "You're not bothering me," she said quietly. She stepped aside, enough for me to enter. Her kitchen was dim, only the oversing light on. A mug sat on the counter, half-drunk tea going cold. She gestured to the table, but stayed standing. I stayed standing too. "I'm sorry," she began, voice low. "If I gave you the wrong idea. Or if I wanted the wrong thing." I shook my head. "You didn't. Or maybe you did. I don't even know what I thought. I broke off, hands gripping the back of a chair. "I kept waiting for you to walk by the window. It was like the only part of the day that made sense." She looked down at her hands. I told myself it was harmless. "Soup, coffee, a walk. You're young." "I'm me. I'm not a kid," I said. It came out sharper than I meant. Then softer. "I know what I'm doing." She smiled faintly, without humor. "I know you think you do." Silence stretched. The fridge hummed. Rain clicked against the glass. "I don't want to ruin your life," she said finally. "Or mine." "You wouldn't," I said. "But you're allowed to be scared." She exhaled, long and slow, as if she'd been holding her breath for weeks. "I've spent so long taking care of everyone else. Even when I rented this place, I thought it'd be simple. I didn't expect someone who'd—" She trailed off, eyes flicking to mine. "See me?" My fingers loosened on the chair. "I didn't expect it either," I said. "I moved here because it was cheap and quiet. And now it's not quiet at all." She laughed once, short and soft. Her hand came up to her temple, then dropped. "I'm not asking for anything," she said. "I'm not either," I replied. Another long pause. The kitchen felt smaller, like the bench under the cedar. The space between us was just air and choices. "I keep thinking," she said slowly, "if I let myself reach for you, I won't know how to stop." "Then maybe just—" My voice failed. I shrugged helplessly. "Just say what you want. I'll listen." She looked at me then, fully. "I want to not feel like I'm trespassing in my own life," she said. "I want to be held without worrying what comes after." My chest hurt, but in a way that felt clean. "I can do that," I said quietly. "For as long as you let me." We didn't move for a long time. Then, almost shyly, she stepped closer. Her fingers brushed the back of my hand, a light, testing touch, like checking if something is hot. I turned my hand, palm up, and she let her fingers settle there, small and warm. "No promises," she whispered. "No promises," I echoed. We stood in the kitchen, hands joined, no plans, no words left to untangle. Just the sound of rain and the faint ticking of the radiator. She gave me a small, tired smile, the kind you give when you've finally stopped running, and I smiled back. For the first time, it felt like neither of us was holding our breath. 6 months later, the radiator still ticked, but more like a heartbeat than a nuisance. We never moved anywhere. Instead, the space between our doors simply softened. She still kept her upstairs life. I still worked nights at the print shop, but now our days had seemed stitched with small, quiet habits. Some mornings, at 8:47 a.m. exactly, she'd leave a thermos on the back step for me, black coffee for her, tea for me, before heading to her shift at the clinic. I'd pick it up on my way in from work, a silent exchange we never made a big deal about. Other mornings, I'd find the thermos waiting on the bench under the cedar tree from that rainy night. Once, on a Sunday, we sat there together again. No umbrellas this time, just sunlight filtering through the branches. She had a paperback open, but wasn't reading. I had my phone, but wasn't scrolling. Our elbows brushed, stayed. We didn't speak much, but it felt like the first honest silence I'd ever shared with someone. Her son came by once, taller than me, polite. She introduced us simply. "Sam, the tenant." We shook hands, nothing more. After he left, she went back to making soup in the kitchen. I chopped onions without asking. We didn't talk about what it meant. It was just another seam in the life we were quietly building. There were still days she'd retreat upstairs, shut the door. Days I'd work late and forget to text. But even in those pauses, the air felt less like a closed door and more like a breath taken before speaking. Neither of us demanded declarations. We just kept showing up. One night after my shift, I found her sitting on the back step with 2 mugs. Steam curled into the cold air. She handed me one. "Tea," she said. I remembered this time. I sipped, then set it down. "Still strong," I murmured, echoing that first morning. She smiled, the small, almost secret one. Guess I didn't forget everything. We sat there, knees touching lightly. The radiator ticked inside, steady and low. Across the courtyard, a pigeon hopped along the wall, same as the day we met. She looked at me then, eyes softer than I'd ever seen them. "Do you ever think about that first day?" she asked. "Every time I hear the radiator," I said, "or see 8:47 on the clock." Her smile deepened, not wide, just true. She reached over, folded the paper napkin I'd been fidgeting with, another callback, and left her hand on mine. No promises spoken, no big reveal. Just the warmth of her palm, steady as the ticking heat. Later, lying in bed, I would think. We never had a grand moment. We just kept making small ones until they held. It wasn't perfect, but it was ours. And sometimes, even now, when the kettle starts to boil and the window fogs, she'll brush past me in the kitchen and murmur, almost to herself, "Still shows up." We both know what she means. It's the kind of thing no one else would notice. But we do.